Our top story today, lawyers for the government and a group of asylum seekers who've been transferred to the mainland are at the High Court today.
The court wasn't due to consider the case of Tamil asylum seekers until August, but it's been brought forward for a special hearing. The Immigration Minister has described the group as economic migrants and not refugees.
The 157 men, women and children arrived at the Curtin Detention Centre in Western Australia overnight after spending weeks on board a customs ship. Scott Morrison says they'll be assessed by Indian consular staff and he expects most will be returned to India.
These people have come from the safe country of India. They haven't come from Sri Lanka. They haven't come from any of those other countries, Afghanistan or anything like that. They have come from India. And, as a result, where they are safe in India, a passage to Australia here is nothing more than an economic migration seeking to illegally enter Australia.
It's the first group of asylum seekers to make it to the mainland since December, but Mr Morrison insists they won't remain here.
With more, I'm joined by Con Karapanagiotidis. He's the Chief Executive of the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre and he joins us from our Melbourne studios. Welcome to the program. Now, the government says these people are economic migrants and there's no fear of persecution in India. What do you make of Scott Morrison's comments?
Scott Morrison's an amazing magician, isn't he? He has the power to read the minds of these 157 and determine without a legal process. Like, it's offensive and appalling for a minister to make that conclusion. Is that just like the 128 on Nauru that have had their cases finalised, 77% of which have already been found to be refugees? Weren't they economic migrants as well? It is appalling that the minister could draw such a long bow with no process, no rule of law, no assessment and no evidence, and put that out and the media starts regurgitating it as though it's fact.
Right, well, so what would you like to see then occur if you do have an issue with that statement from the Immigration Minister? What would you like to occur next?
Yeah, I'd like us to go back to what I thought Australia was, which was 1, a sovereign nation. 2, a country that assesses its own refugees. 3, that doesn't outsource it to a country that's not a signatory to the convention. 4, that doesn't try to engage in rulefulment through the back door. 5, that doesn't breach the right to privacy and an in-camera process when assessing refugee claims. And 6, actually follows the systems we have in place now, which as a refugee lawyer who's acted in thousands of cases tells you this: if someone claiming asylum has a safe third country of origin, they will be refused as a refugee. We already have a system to do that. The idea that as a sovereign nation, we're handing that over to the Indian government to pick and choose like we're trading animals or cards or something like that is deeply offensive to our democracy, our protections and our international obligations.
So do you have a problem here with the process that the government is suggesting now takes place?
Of
or
course.
with those specific issues that was discussed that there is no fear of persecution for these people in India?
Look, remember this, unless those people are Indian citizens, and those who are would under our legal system as well not be found to be refugees, as long as those people aren't making refugee claims against India. The minister doesn't even know that and he's potentially giving access to a government who might in fact be persecuting those people. Let's remember, India doesn't have a clean human rights record either. In 2012 there were 1,600 complaints regarding deaths caused and persecution of gender, ethnic and religious minorities. Look at what's happening, for example, to women in India right now. They don't have clean hands to begin with. Secondly, I have a deep problem with giving another country access to people seeking protection here. It's unprecedented, it's unlawful, it breaches our obligations, and we have a legal process to do this. How could any Australian sit there and think this is acceptable? Would we go and outsource our High Court or our family court or our criminal courts to Indian officials? What training do they have? What undertakings have they given? How do we know they're not going to take non-citizens back home and then refool them to Sri Lanka? They're not a signatory, which means they have no legal obligation to protect people who are refugees. That should trouble us all.
Okay, so Mr Karapanagiotidis, can you just tell me what exactly you think should be done now?
Very simply, these people are on our mainland. We have a little thing called the Refugee Convention, and we have a refugee determination process that's held us strong for decades. It's a great system we have when you process people. Here's what could happen. Crazy idea. We assess these people's refugee claims like we do asylum seekers who come by plane to this country. We assess them according to the Refugee Convention and the Migration Act. If they're refugees, we allow them to remain here. If they're not, we send them back home. All I'm asking is that we uphold the law, apply the law, just like you've got Tony Abbott talking about doing so with the victims of M17. He's happy to ask for the UN, the rule of law and fair process and transparency. Well, why don't refugees deserve that as well? You can't have it both ways. We either stand for the rule of law, democracy and natural justice, or we don't. You can't pick and choose it when it's politically expedient for you to do so.
Con Karapanagiotidis, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.